I am Megan Wallace, 32, and literally last weekend my lifelong role as the family's invisible financial fixer backfired spectacularly when Mom coldly called me just the accountant, lighting a spark that changes everything. The brunch I dreaded was at our favorite upscale cafe in town, a glittery place Mom loved because it matched her image. It was exactly the kind of pretentious family gathering I usually suffered through silently, nodding and smiling at the endless bragging about Gina's law firm victories or Troy's latest real estate deal. My stomach twisted, just thinking about it, knowing how easily they'd overlook me once again. As we sat down, Dad immediately launched into proud proclamations about Troy's new multi-million-dollar listing. Gina quickly chimed in with her latest courtroom triumph, an acquisition deal she'd managed to finesse for some flashy startup. I tried to speak up about my own recent achievements, carefully managing our family's tangled assets, quietly saving them from tax nightmares, but they glossed over me as usual, barely acknowledging my presence. The server interrupted us briefly, placing delicate china plates filled with eggs Benedict and fluffy, overpriced pancakes. Everyone continued chatting enthusiastically, effortlessly talking over me. My fork poked listlessly at the hollandaise sauce pooling around my plate, a stark reminder of how empty these family rituals had become for me. Finally, Gina leaned toward me with a brittle smile, her eyes sparkling with condescension disguised as curiosity. "Megan, you still handling spreadsheets or whatever?" she asked lightly, clearly uninterested in my response. I felt the familiar sting, my cheeks warming as I struggled to keep my composure. Before I could answer, Mom casually waved a manicured hand. "Oh please Gina, let's not exaggerate. Megan's just the accountant. Let's keep the conversation interesting." The table fell silent for a beat, a short, cruel pause. Troy snickered, and Dad chuckled nervously, glancing away, avoiding confrontation as always. Heat surged through my veins, anger mixing with embarrassment. Just the accountant. As if my entire existence was nothing more than a tedious service provided freely, without thanks or acknowledgement. The frustration I'd pushed down for years suddenly rose, impossible to ignore. How many times had I painstakingly untangled their financial messes? How often had I quietly fixed their credit scores, saved their properties, and prevented bankruptcy, all without even a whispered thank you? Yet here I was, still reduced to just the accountant. I clenched my fists under the tablecloth, nails digging into my palms. Enough was enough. In that moment, something shifted deep within me. Their careless dismissal wasn't breaking me. It was igniting a determination I'd never felt before. I'd spent years bending myself backward to fit their expectations, accepting their crumbs of affection like charity. But their indifference had finally pushed me too far. "Well, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. "Maybe it's time this accountant stopped fixing everyone else's problems." The stunned silence that followed was deafening. Mom's eyes narrowed dangerously, clearly taken aback by my rare moment of defiance. Gina blinked rapidly, and even Troy's arrogant grin wavered. Dad simply stared, mouth slightly agape, unsure how to react, but I was already standing, placing my napkin calmly beside my untouched meal. And here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay with me for the most satisfying revenge you'll ever hear. Looking back, it's almost... you wouldn't believe what they will do once I finally cut them off. Driving home from that disastrous brunch, my fingers tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Anger simmered beneath my skin, accompanied by a heavy sadness, like a cloud hanging overhead, dark and relentless. But what hurt the most wasn't Mom's casual dismissal or Gina's cutting smirk, it was that none of this was new. The same scene had been playing on repeat for as long as I could remember. My mind drifted back to moments when I'd naively believed things would change. Like when I was 17, and I'd won a state economics competition. I'd rushed home, eager for praise, proudly holding the small gold-plated trophy that had felt enormous in my young hands. But Mom had barely looked up from the glossy fashion magazine she was flipping through. "Oh, lovely, Megan," she'd murmured absently, her eyes still glued to photos of luxury vacations she'd never afford without my careful budgeting. Troy, lounging nearby, had snorted dismissively. Economics? How thrilling, he sneered sarcastically, rolling his eyes. Gina giggled, feeding off his mockery. The trophy quickly found a permanent home, collecting dust in a forgotten corner of my bookshelf. Then there was college graduation, summa cum laude no less, when Dad spent the whole ceremony checking his phone, and Mom couldn't stop talking about Gina's recent internship at some prestigious law firm. I remember standing on stage, heart swelling with pride and anxiety, scanning the crowd for my family's faces. When I finally spotted them, they weren't even looking at me. Mom had leaned over, laughing softly at something Gina whispered, clearly oblivious to the moment I'd worked tirelessly to earn. Year after year it continued, each milestone overshadowed or ignored completely. Troy's promotion got a celebratory dinner. Gina's engagement party became a lavish spectacle. Meanwhile, my quiet accomplishments, meticulously growing the family's wealth, navigating investments, and quietly paying down their debts, were invisible. I was like a backstage crew member working diligently to keep the show running while the stars basked in applause. And even worse, it wasn't only my achievements they ignored. It was me. Entirely. Birthdays spent alone while the family vacationed abroad. Holidays when I sat quietly on the edge of conversations, watching them praise each other's minor triumphs while ignoring my quiet but crucial role. Family photos where I stood awkwardly off to the side, always a step removed, almost as if my presence was accidental. Over time, their indifference carved a hollow space inside me. But I convinced myself it was better to accept crumbs of attention than nothing at all. I became so used to being overlooked that I'd begun to believe it was all I deserved. An invisible presence, useful only as long as I silently managed their affairs. Pulling into my driveway, my car engine ticking gently as it cooled, I realized that brunch had been the final straw. The tiny, sharp pain from Mom's dismissive comment had finally pierced through years of numb acceptance. I felt myself teetering on the edge of something momentous, something I'd never dared consider before. I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror. The reflection staring back was tired but determined, eyes bright with newfound resolve. My days as the family's invisible fixer were done. A smile, small but genuine, slowly curved my lips. It felt unfamiliar yet empowering, a quiet declaration of independence. They'd dismissed me once too often. Now they'd have to face the consequences. The very next morning, fueled by a restless night of simmering thoughts, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of steaming coffee, staring blankly at my laptop. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patches on my desk, but inside, I felt stormy. Yesterday's brunch echoed relentlessly in my mind. Mom's cold dismissal replaying endlessly. I knew I needed more than just a momentary rebellion. If I truly wanted to reclaim my life, it had to be real, lasting, and completely independent of their approval. Then it hit me. A quiet revelation so powerful that my heart skipped a beat. For years I'd used my talents to protect my family's image, quietly rescuing them from financial chaos. What if I channeled that expertise into something that belonged only to me? A private endeavor they couldn't belittle or ignore, because they'd never even know about it. Determined, I opened a fresh document and began mapping out my ideas. I'd start my own wealth management firm, something boutique and discreet, leveraging every hidden strength I'd developed over years of thankless labor. This wouldn't be about chasing their validation. It would be entirely mine, built from the ground up, away from their judgmental eyes. The plan unfolded in my mind with exhilarating clarity. In the coming weeks, I quietly poured hours into research, securing credentials and licenses, drawing up meticulous business plans, and developing a brand that spoke of sophistication, discretion, and trustworthiness. Each evening after my regular job, I shut myself away in my cozy home office, working until the early hours, driven by a fierce determination I'd never experienced before. But it wasn't easy. I had to battle the voice in my head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Mom's, telling me I wasn't good enough, skilled enough, or charismatic enough to succeed on my own terms. Yet, every time that voice grew louder, I silenced it with action. Another late night, another milestone achieved, another step closer to my dream. I took on my first few private clients quietly, discreetly, working evenings and weekends. Initially, they were people who, like me, had been overshadowed or underestimated. They quickly became loyal, impressed not only by my skills but by my genuine care for their financial well-being. Word spread rapidly among their circles, and before long I had a growing roster of clients, all high-net-worth individuals who valued discretion and effectiveness. With each new success, my confidence grew. There was no public acclaim, no family praise, just a profound personal satisfaction, more powerful and real than anything I'd ever felt. My firm blossomed beneath their radar, steadily becoming a silent powerhouse. Clients entrusted me with significant portfolios, their praise genuine and sincere, the kind of acknowledgement I'd craved for so long from my own family but never received. Months passed and my secret project transformed into something far bigger than I'd imagined. My hidden success was becoming immense. Yet my family remained blissfully unaware, still thinking of me as just the accountant. Late one night, sitting alone in my office, I closed a major deal, the largest yet, and stared numbly at the glowing confirmation on my screen. Tears welled up unexpectedly, relief and pride flooding through me. This moment was mine alone, untouched by their dismissive judgments. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the profound silence. For the first time I understood what true independence felt like. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was deeply powerful, a quiet triumph that belonged to me, and only me. The world saw just Megan Wallace, the overlooked accountant. But privately, silently, I had become so much more. Fast forward to today, the morning sunlight slipping through my office blinds, illuminating my neatly organized desk as I checked my phone again, pulse quickening with nerves and excitement. It was the day I'd been quietly working toward for months. A major financial firm had expressed serious interest in acquiring my boutique wealth management company, and after weeks of meticulous negotiation, the final offer was on the table. It was more than life-changing. It was validation of everything I'd built secretly, brick by brick, on my own terms. The official documents glowed invitingly on my laptop screen. All I had to do was sign, and I'd instantly vault from the shadows of family dismissal into undeniable success. Yet, even as pride bubbled through me, another feeling twisted sharply in my gut. Tonight was also the dreaded annual family dinner, the one I'd been anxious about for weeks. It was traditionally Mom's favorite event, filled with forced smiles, subtle jabs at my expense, and relentless boasting from Gina and Troy. I'd spent years enduring these gatherings, quietly swallowing humiliation to maintain the fragile family peace. But after the brunch incident and my secret success, tonight felt different. My stomach tightened into knots as I imagined the inevitable dismissive comments, now even more intolerable. Would tonight be the breaking point? How much longer could I pretend their words didn't sting? That their laughter at my expense didn't chip away at me, piece by painful piece? My phone vibrated, interrupting my anxious thoughts, a gentle reminder of the life I'd built beyond their reach. A message from my assistant Zoe flashed on screen. "Congratulations, Megan, this is your moment. Let's celebrate soon." I smiled faintly, grateful for her genuine support. Zoe was one of the few people aware of the company's true scale. Someone who saw me clearly, who never dismissed or belittled me. She was the polar opposite of my family, encouraging, respectful, genuinely proud. Yet as much as Zoe's words warmed me, tonight's looming dinner cast a shadow. I wondered briefly what it would feel like to walk into that pretentious room with my newfound truth displayed boldly, undeniable proof of my worth right there on the screen. But even imagining their shocked faces wasn't enough to quell the nerves pooling uncomfortably in my chest. Because deep down I feared it wouldn't change anything. Their dismissive words weren't born from ignorance of my success. They came from ingrained indifference, from a stubborn refusal to value me beyond the utility I provided. Exhaling slowly, I stood from my desk, gently closing the laptop and silencing the buzzing notifications. This evening I'd once again enter their perfectly staged world, feeling the familiar dread rise in me as I'd mask my growing strength behind careful smiles and quiet nods. As I moved toward the door, catching a brief glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, I paused. I saw not the overlooked family accountant, but the quietly powerful woman who'd built something extraordinary on her own, independent of their approval. "Tonight," I whispered firmly to the reflection, "will be the last time." I stepped into the hallway, the quiet certainty of my decision growing louder with each heartbeat. Whatever happened tonight, whatever cruelty or indifference they served up, I knew now it would be temporary. My days of enduring their casual dismissal were numbered. The moment I'd finally reclaim my life was close enough to touch. And somehow that quiet truth filled me with a courage I'd never felt before. The familiar tension settled into my shoulders the moment I stepped into my parents' grand foyer later that evening. The house buzzed with chatter and laughter, the walls echoing with superficial cheerfulness. Crystal chandeliers glittered from the ceiling, casting a sparkling glow over the guests already mingling in the living room. Friends of the family who had known us for years, yet never seemed to remember my name. "Megan, dear, you actually made it," Mom remarked dryly as she swept past, barely glancing at me. Her tone suggested surprise, as if I'd never been anything but reliable. I bit back a response, swallowing down the instinctive hurt. Gina appeared at Mom's side moments later, her expensive silk dress shimmering perfectly in the light. "Ah, look who decided to show up," she purred sarcastically, flicking her gaze dismissively over my simple, carefully chosen outfit. Before I could respond, Troy sauntered over, flashing his trademark smug grin. "Busy counting pennies again, Meg?" He chuckled at his own joke, oblivious to the sting of his words. Mom laughed lightly, exchanging a knowing look with Gina. My fingers tightened involuntarily around my purse strap. Their dismissive comments landed with predictable cruelty, each one carefully designed to remind me of my lesser role within the family. But something felt different tonight. Instead of crumbling beneath their disdain, a small, defiant spark flared to life within me. Dinner itself was even worse, a carefully choreographed ballet of subtle insults and barely concealed sneers. Mom, at the head of the polished dining table, kept the conversation carefully focused on Gina's latest legal victory, a tedious tale she'd recounted 3 times already. Dad nodded proudly, and Troy chimed in whenever he could, embellishing Gina's achievements as if they were his own. My attempts at conversation were quickly drowned out, lost beneath waves of louder, more valued voices. Finally, Mom turned her perfectly coiffed head toward me, an eyebrow arching elegantly as if she'd just remembered my existence. "Oh, Megan," she drawled smoothly, cutting effortlessly through the room's chatter, "I hope you won't be too disappointed, but we're not going to need your accounting help anymore." Gina recommended someone from her firm, someone more professional. A thick, uncomfortable silence settled around the table, broken only by Troy's muffled snicker. Dad shifted awkwardly in his chair, staring intently down at his plate. Gina sipped her wine calmly, eyes glittering with smug triumph. My cheeks flushed hotly, humiliation crawling over my skin. It was the ultimate public dismissal, a brutal declaration that even my quiet, invaluable service was no longer needed. Yet, beneath my embarrassment, that spark inside ignited into a steady flame of defiance. I'd expected their cruelty, anticipated their indifference. But now, faced with their calculated rejection, something fierce rose within me. "Well, I'm sure Gina's friend will have plenty to do," I responded evenly, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Because you have no idea how much I've been quietly cleaning up for years." Mom's eyes widened briefly, surprised by my unexpected pushback. Gina paused mid-sip, mouth tightening, while Troy blinked dumbly, clearly taken aback. But Dad's expression was the most striking, genuine confusion, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. The silence that followed felt electric, charged with possibility. For years I'd quietly absorbed their disdain, remaining small to fit comfortably into their expectations, but tonight for the first time I'd openly challenged their contempt. My heart raced as I met Mom's gaze unflinchingly, feeling a powerful shift inside me. Tonight was different. Tonight I'd finally had enough. For a long, tense moment, silence engulfed the table, thick enough to choke on. Mom's perfectly manicured nails tapped irritably against her wineglass, the rhythmic clicking magnifying my heartbeat. Gina exchanged a wary glance with Troy, their smugness temporarily shattered by the unexpected defiance I'd shown. Finally, Mom placed her glass down with deliberate precision. Her eyes, cool and calculating, fixed firmly on mine, glittering with barely contained anger. She inhaled slowly, commanding the attention of everyone at the table, and spoke with brutal clarity. "Since you clearly have so many grievances, Megan, perhaps it's time we formally clear things up," she declared, voice dripping with icy contempt. Consider this your official notice. You're no longer part of this family's affairs. From now on, you're completely on your own." My breath caught sharply in my throat, and a ringing filled my ears. I'd known this confrontation was coming, had felt it looming ominously for days, but hearing it announced so starkly still sent a rush of pain slicing through my chest. Around the table, eyes widened, guests exchanged shocked murmurs, and Troy stared blankly into his wineglass, suddenly uncomfortable. Gina's lips parted slightly, clearly not expecting Mom's harshness to be so explicit. Dad looked stricken, torn between discomfort and compliance, though he said nothing. Mom held her gaze steady, eyes narrowed in quiet triumph, waiting for me to crumble beneath her judgment. But even as humiliation clawed at my throat, the quiet defiance I'd been nurturing began to strengthen, steadying my nerves. Instead of breaking down or pleading for forgiveness, as I had so many times in the past, I simply straightened my posture, drawing upon an inner strength I hadn't fully realized existed. "Understood," I answered calmly, my voice steadier than I'd dared hope. "Maybe now you'll finally see how much you relied on me." Mom scoffed softly, dismissing my words with a careless wave of her hand. "Oh, please, Megan, we've never truly relied on you. You've always been replaceable. You simply didn't know it yet." Her cruel words stabbed deeper than any she'd ever spoken before, but instead of shattering me, they crystallized a truth I'd been denying for years. My family had never valued me, not as a daughter, not as a sister, not even as the invisible backbone holding their lives together. In their eyes, I'd only ever been disposable. And in that moment, rather than shrinking back into the shadows, I finally chose to accept this painful truth and to reclaim my own dignity. "You know," I said softly, meeting Mom's gaze head-on, "for years, I've done everything to protect this family. I've cleaned up your messes, covered your mistakes, and shielded your precious image from consequences you can't even imagine. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's time you saw what life looks like without me." My words hung in the air, heavy with quiet threat. Mom's composure faltered momentarily, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Gina and Troy exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsettled by the quiet intensity behind my words. Even Dad, so used to ignoring conflict, seemed suddenly attentive. I stood, deliberately folding my napkin and placing it neatly beside my untouched meal, the weight of countless invisible moments of dismissal crystallizing into a decisive action. "Enjoy your dinner," I said quietly, the words firm but dignified. Without waiting for their reply, I turned toward the exit, feeling their shocked, judgmental gazes burning holes into my back. Yet as I stepped from the dining room into the cold, clear evening air, a sense of relief surged through me, powerful enough to drown out any lingering pain. The family I'd once desperately sought acceptance from had officially severed ties, but for the first time, the realization felt not like abandonment but freedom. Outside in the cool evening air, the quiet relief I'd felt a moment ago faded quickly into sharp, piercing vulnerability. I leaned against my car, taking slow breaths, letting the crisp breeze steady me. The adrenaline that carried me through that confrontation was now giving way to a painful realization. I'd just lost the family I'd spent my life desperately trying to please. My phone vibrated suddenly, jolting me from my anxious thoughts. Glancing down, I saw Zoe's name lighting up the screen. Relieved, I answered, grateful for the lifeline of her familiar voice. "Megan," Zoe practically shouted, excitement crackling through the phone. "I've been trying to reach you. Have you seen the email?" "What email?" My voice trembled slightly, still shaky from the dinner. "The final contract came through early." Zoe's enthusiasm was contagious, pulling my attention away from the raw emotions still swirling inside me. "Megan, they increased the offer, dramatically. It's official. You've just closed a $22 million deal." My knees nearly buckled beneath me, breath leaving my lungs in a sharp gasp. "Wait. What?" I stammered, disbelieving. "They sent the paperwork 10 minutes ago. It's done. You're officially a multimillionaire CEO." Zoe laughed gleefully, her voice ringing with genuine pride. "Congratulations, Megan. You earned every penny." My vision blurred, tears pricking hotly at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of vindication. Standing alone on the quiet street, the enormity of my achievement sank in fully. Every late night, every hidden sacrifice, every cruel dismissal had brought me here, to this life-changing moment of success. A choked sob escaped my throat, equal parts relief and joy. Zoe laughed softly, sensing the emotional weight behind my silence. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I'm more than okay," I finally managed, voice thick with emotion. This is everything. Just moments earlier, I'd stood at the dinner table, publicly dismissed and disowned, feeling my family's judgment pressing heavily on me. Yet now, with Zoe's jubilant announcement, I felt reborn, validated beyond anything I'd imagined. My success was no longer quiet or invisible. It was undeniable, impossible to dismiss or belittle. But even as triumph surged through me, the bitter taste of betrayal lingered on my tongue. How ironic that at the exact moment my family cut me off, my hidden value had just skyrocketed. Zoe's voice pulled me back. "Hey Megan, are you still there?" "Yes, sorry," I whispered, smiling weakly into the darkness. "It's just perfect timing." "Wait, were you still at that dinner?" Zoe asked, suddenly cautious. "Yeah," I said softly. "They officially disowned me about 15 minutes ago." "Oh Megan," Zoe breathed, concern filling her voice. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I answered firmly, feeling strength returning with each heartbeat. "It's actually poetic justice. They thought they were leaving me with nothing, but they just freed me to embrace everything." I could hear Zoe's smile through the phone. "That's the spirit. So, how does freedom feel?" I paused, savoring the question. The quiet street, the glowing lights, the crisp air, it all felt vividly real. For once I was completely present, completely myself, unburdened by anyone else's expectations or demands. "It feels incredible," I finally said, voice steady and clear, like I'm finally living my own life. We shared a quiet moment of understanding, my heart swelling with gratitude for Zoe and every genuine person who had supported me. My gaze drifted briefly back toward the brightly lit windows of my family's house, where they remained oblivious to the fortune I had just secured. Let them enjoy their ignorance a little longer. They'd soon learn just how mistaken they'd been. Tonight was the turning point, the exact moment when the overlooked, dismissed daughter they'd abandoned became someone they could never ignore again. I barely had time to pocket my phone before the front door burst open, spilling harsh golden light onto the driveway. Mom emerged first, eyes narrowed, cheeks flushed, a furious goddess descending to confront me. Gina and Troy trailed behind, anxious and uncertain, while Dad lingered awkwardly in the doorway. "Megan!" Mom's voice cracked through the still night air, sharp and imperious. "We need to talk." I turned slowly, deliberately meeting her gaze. Something had fundamentally changed inside me, something irreversible and powerful. I felt calm, strangely centered in a way I'd never experienced when facing their judgment before. The knowledge of my success anchored me firmly, giving me strength to withstand anything they threw my way. "What's there left to say, Mom?" I asked evenly, refusing to let her intimidation tactics unsettle me. She halted a few feet away, arms crossed defensively over her silk blouse, eyes burning with indignation. "Don't play games, Megan, we heard everything. That call, what's going on?" "Seems the accountant wasn't as replaceable as you thought," I replied softly, a smile tugging at my lips despite myself. Gina stepped forward nervously, attempting to mask her unease with false confidence. "Just tell us what's going on. Is this some sort of stunt?" "No stunt," I responded calmly. "Just the reality you all refused to see. I built my own firm, and tonight, I signed a $22 million acquisition deal. It's done." Mom's eyes widened, disbelief flashing briefly before she quickly composed herself. Troy glanced at Gina, alarm registering clearly on their faces. "And you never said a word?" Mom hissed, voice filled with accusation. "When exactly was I supposed to?" I countered, a hint of bitterness seeping through my controlled tone. "Between your dismissive comments or while you laughed about how replaceable I was?" Mom faltered, momentarily speechless, clearly unsettled by my newfound assertiveness. "Megan, that's not fair," she began weakly. "We never meant—" "You meant exactly what you said," I interrupted sharply, my voice hardening with anger I'd suppressed far too long. "You disowned me tonight, remember? Officially cut me off, so please don't pretend you suddenly care because you see what you've lost." Dad shifted uneasily behind them, eyes cast downward, clearly ashamed but silent as always. Troy cleared his throat awkwardly, finally breaking the tense silence. "Meg, look, we didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," I snapped back, eyes blazing, "because you never bothered to look." You enjoyed the luxury my hard work provided while ignoring the person behind it. Well, that's over. Mom's confidence crumbled, her voice now tinged with desperation. Megan, please, let's just talk this through calmly. We're still family. Family? The word tasted bitter on my tongue, anger giving way to quiet resolve. Family doesn't dismiss and humiliate each other. Family doesn't use someone endlessly and then discard them. You don't get to redefine that now, just because you realize you made a mistake. Gina opened her mouth to argue, but I raised a hand, silencing her. No. Tonight, you finally showed me exactly where I stand. I've spent my life protecting you financially and emotionally, but I'm done. I took a deep breath, steadying my trembling hands and fixed Mom with an unyielding stare. As of tomorrow morning, the cabin you love so much it's in my name is being sold. The credit lines I've kept open for you? Closed. Every asset I've quietly managed for you? Handled by someone else from now on. You wanted independence from me? Congratulations. You have it. Mom's face paled dramatically, horror dawning as she absorbed my words. Gina and Troy exchanged panicked glances, fully grasping the extent of my actions. You can't do this, Mom whispered desperately, voice trembling. You'll ruin us. No, I replied evenly, a profound sense of closure filling my chest. I'm simply refusing to let you ruin me. Without another word, I turned my back on their shocked, frightened faces, walking calmly toward my car. This time, as I drove away, I felt no sadness, only clarity, freedom, and a profound sense of peace. By the time I pulled into Zoe's driveway, my heart had steadied. Her little house was glowing warmly against the night, soft laughter spilling out from the open windows, instantly welcoming me. As I approached, the door swung open and Zoe appeared, eyes bright with genuine pride. There she is, the woman of the hour, she announced warmly, wrapping me in a fierce, comforting hug. Welcome home, Megan. The phrase hit me deeply. Home. Something I'd never fully felt at my own family's house. I held on to her a moment longer than usual, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes, grateful that someone truly saw me. Pulling back, Zoe studied my face gently. Rough night, huh? She asked softly, sensing the raw emotion I was still holding. Understatement, I laughed weakly, but a new, stronger voice spoke up from within me. But I wouldn't change how it ended, not for anything. Inside, Zoe's living room was warm and cozy, scented with homemade pizza and fresh popcorn. Familiar faces filled the space, my real family, chosen not by blood but by genuine love and support. Libby, my oldest friend from college, immediately rushed over, throwing her arms around me, babbling excitedly about my big news. Ben, her husband, clapped me proudly on the shoulder, while Holly, Zoe's sister, beamed brightly from across the room. Let's toast, Zoe announced joyfully, quickly pouring glasses of champagne. To Megan, the most badass, brilliant multimillionaire we've ever known. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, glasses clinking warmly. My heart swelled with gratitude as I glanced around, meeting each sincere, joyful gaze. How stark the contrast between tonight's painful family dinner and this simple, authentic celebration. Here, surrounded by these genuine people, I wasn't invisible or disposable. I was fully seen, valued, and deeply loved. Settling onto Zoe's cozy couch, Libby squeezed my hand comfortingly. Megan, are you really okay? She whispered, eyes soft with understanding. I am, I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of my answer. Tonight finally made things clear, painful but clear. Libby nodded knowingly. Sometimes clarity comes from the worst places. But look around, you've got us, you're never alone. The words settled warmly in my chest, the quiet power of chosen family wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. These were the people who stood by me through quiet struggles and loud celebrations, who never measured my worth by my utility. This was real family, the one I'd created, nurtured, and cherished far more genuinely than the family I was born into. Hey Megan, Holly called playfully, pulling me back into the joyful noise of the room. Promise you won't become too fancy for our pizza and movie nights now that you're rolling in millions? I laughed, the sound genuine and easy for the first time all day. Never. This is exactly what I want more of, not less. Zoe smiled gently, settling beside me, eyes twinkling warmly. Good answer, but seriously Megan, tonight you've officially become our inspiration. You took the worst life threw at you and transformed it into something incredible. I paused thoughtfully, absorbing her words, heart quietly filling with pride. I'd spent my whole life desperately chasing validation from people incapable of giving it, but here it was, freely offered from those who mattered most. You know, I admitted softly, looking at Zoe, then Libby, and around at everyone who'd gathered to support me. For the first time, I truly believe it. Zoe raised her glass again, eyes shining. To Megan, finally seeing her worth, and to family, the one we choose and build ourselves. The room echoed her toast warmly, laughter bubbling up around us. I leaned back into the comfort of my chosen family, feeling more myself than ever before. Tonight, beneath the simple warmth of friendship, I finally realized exactly where I belonged, and where I'd always belonged. It wasn't among people who dismissed and belittled me. It was here, in a home built on genuine love, mutual respect, and unconditional support. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages and voicemails from my family, each one more desperate, more apologetic, and more manipulative than the last. But for the first time, their pleas fell on deaf ears. I'd drawn a line, firm and unyielding, and I was finally prepared to defend it. The morning after Zoe's comforting gathering, I woke early, filled with purpose. My mind was clear, resolute, and ready for the actions I'd mapped out for so long, but had never truly thought I'd execute. With calculated precision, I began severing every last financial tie, linking me to the people who'd so casually dismissed me. First was the cabin, a charming lakeside retreat, registered under my name years ago at Dad's insistence. For tax purposes, he'd said. My parents had turned it into their favored weekend getaway, hosting endless brunches and parties without ever offering me an invite. Now, without hesitation, I placed the property on the market, fielding immediate offers from eager buyers. The speed at which it sold, well over asking price, felt deliciously satisfying. Next, I called my bank to close the shared credit line Mom relied on, a financial cushion I'd provided quietly for years. The bank representative confirmed the closure promptly, her friendly tone unknowingly adding a final flourish of vindication. By the afternoon, my email inbox overflowed with frantic questions and accusations from Mom, Gina, and Troy. Dad remained notably silent, as always avoiding direct confrontation. They demanded explanations, threatened legal action, pleaded desperately, but I simply replied with professional detachment, calmly directing them to their new accountant, the one Gina had so confidently recommended. Their panic felt strangely empowering, not because of revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, I was fully in control of the boundaries they'd always ignored. My family's frantic attempts to regain their footing only underscored the painful truth. They'd needed me desperately all along, but had chosen to dismiss me anyway. 3 days later, Mom showed up unannounced at my office. Her polished composure, usually impeccable, was visibly frayed. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of sleepless nights, spent grappling with the sudden loss of security I'd quietly provided. "Megan," she began carefully, her voice measured and strained. "Let's discuss this rationally." "I already made everything perfectly clear," I replied calmly, not even rising from my chair. "You wanted independence, and now you have it." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, frustration flickering beneath her controlled facade. "This isn't independence. It's punishment." I shook my head softly. "No, Mom, it's boundaries, real ones, something we should have established years ago." She exhaled sharply, her shoulders sagging slightly. For a fleeting moment, vulnerability flashed in her eyes. "I admit we underestimated you, Megan, but family makes mistakes. Can't we move past this?" "Not until you acknowledge what moving forward means," I said firmly. "It means respecting me, genuinely seeing me, not just using me. If you're capable of that, maybe one day we can talk again." Mom hesitated, clearly struggling against a lifetime of pride and entitlement. "I don't know if we can do things your way," she finally admitted quietly, eyes filled with reluctant honesty. "Then nothing will change," I responded simply. "I'm finally at peace with that." She left soon after, silent and thoughtful. For the first time, I felt genuinely seen by her, even if she couldn't fully embrace it yet. I'd stood my ground, refusing to fall back into old patterns, and the quiet victory was profound. As the days turned into weeks, my new boundaries became unwavering pillars of strength. I found empowerment in small moments, ignoring manipulative texts, declining carefully worded invitations, protecting myself fiercely yet calmly. And gradually, the calls and messages slowed. fading into respectful silence. The family who'd always expected unlimited access finally accepted that the door they'd casually walked through my entire life was now firmly, irrevocably closed, opened only on my terms, not theirs. The fortress I'd constructed was no longer a wall built out of pain and rejection. It was a boundary rooted in self-respect, dignity, and strength, a quiet testament to how far I'd come and how much I'd grown. With my new boundaries firmly in place, I finally had space to redefine what my success meant, not just for myself but also for the legacy tied to the Wallace family name. I had quietly spent years building wealth for people who treated money as validation, status, and power. Now I had the opportunity to rewrite our story, using my success to create something meaningful, something worthy of respect. A month after my dramatic break with the family, I stood in the doorway of a bright, open office downtown. The space was filled with natural sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating sleek desks, vibrant artwork, and freshly painted walls. Today marked the official opening of the Wallace Foundation, a philanthropic initiative I'd launched to invest in financial literacy programs, educational scholarships, and resources for young entrepreneurs who'd been overlooked or dismissed, just like I had once been. As I greeted the arriving guests, friends, colleagues, and respected community leaders, a profound sense of purpose filled me. This wasn't merely another charitable project, it was a reclamation of my family name. The Wallace Foundation stood for compassion, empowerment, and integrity, values I'd personally fought to uphold, despite the indifference I'd faced my whole life. Zoe was at my side, glowing with pride as she introduced me warmly to each guest. "This is Megan Wallace," she said confidently, her eyes sparkling, founder and CEO of the Wallace Foundation. Each introduction felt like a small triumph, reaffirming the truth I'd worked tirelessly to claim. I was more than just the quiet accountant my family had dismissed. I was a leader, a visionary, someone capable of profound impact and change. Midway through the celebration, I noticed a familiar figure quietly slip inside, my father cautiously standing at the edge of the room, hands clasped awkwardly. His presence surprised me. Dad had remained mostly silent since that disastrous dinner. Yet here he was, tentative but genuine, quietly acknowledging the legacy I'd built entirely without the family's support. Approaching slowly, Dad met my gaze with vulnerability I'd rarely seen. "This is truly incredible, Megan," he said softly, voice thick with genuine emotion. "You built something beautiful." "Thank you," I replied quietly, warmth blossoming inside me at his sincere words. "It means a lot that you're here." Dad sighed deeply, struggling visibly with his words. "I regret, well, everything. How we treated you. How we overlooked what mattered most. You deserved better." "I did," I answered softly, holding his gaze with gentle firmness. "And now I have it. I'm finally living the life I always wanted, on my own terms." He nodded slowly, thoughtful and humbled. "I see that. And honestly, I'm proud. You've given the Wallace name real dignity." His words settled warmly in my chest, validating everything I'd quietly hoped for. My legacy wasn't about their approval anymore, it was about authenticity, integrity, and the courage to define myself independently. The room buzzed softly with conversation and laughter as Dad quietly left, leaving me filled with quiet gratitude and reflection. I looked around at the foundation I'd created, the positive energy radiating from the people gathered here today, individuals inspired by compassion, purpose, and genuine human connection. For the first time, I fully understood the power behind my journey. My family had attempted to control and define me through dismissal and manipulation, yet their rejection had only strengthened my resolve. Through quiet determination and relentless self-belief, I'd reclaimed my family legacy, reshaping it into something profoundly meaningful. Standing proudly in the Wallace Foundation, surrounded by warmth and genuine respect, I finally felt at peace with my name, my identity, and my path. My family's past dismissal no longer defined me. Instead, it had inspired me to build something far greater than they ever imagined possible. This, finally, was the legacy I'd always been destined to leave behind. Late that evening, after the celebration had ended and everyone had gone home, I stood alone by the expansive windows overlooking the softly glowing city below. The quiet stillness felt comforting, like an embrace. For the first time in my life, silence no longer meant loneliness. It meant peace. My reflection in the glass stared back, calm and steady, so different from the woman I'd been just months before. I'd once lived entirely through the lens of my family's expectations, chasing a validation they could never truly give. But now, standing here, surrounded by a legacy I'd built independently, I saw someone transformed, someone who found validation from within. As I gazed at the lights flickering across the city, memories drifted through my mind, each one a stepping stone, leading me exactly here. All those painful moments, the dismissive brunches, humiliating dinners, and countless ignored achievements, had once felt like unending punishment. But now, with the clarity of distance, I recognized they'd been necessary catalysts, shaping the resilience and strength I'd needed to reach this moment. I thought back to Mom's face that night at dinner, her cold announcement cutting me loose from a family that never truly valued me. At the time, it had felt devastating, a final, brutal rejection. But standing here now, it was clear she'd unintentionally handed me the key to my own freedom. I'd needed that final push, that painful truth, to finally choose myself. A soft knock at the door broke through my thoughts. Zoe poked her head in, a gentle smile lighting her face. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I answered warmly, beckoning her over. Zoe joined me, standing quietly by the window, both of us watching the peaceful city lights. "You know," Zoe said after a moment, voice thoughtful, "I've watched you quietly fight battles no one else saw. You've earned every ounce of this happiness, Megan." I turned toward her, heart swelling gratefully. "I finally believe it, and not because of the money, or the company, or even the foundation. I feel worthy because I know myself now. I trust myself." Zoe squeezed my hand gently. "That's your real victory. Everything else is just a bonus." We stood together in easy silence, letting the profound truth of her words sink in. I finally understood that my family's approval, or lack thereof, had never truly defined me. The validation I'd spent my life desperately chasing was always within my grasp, waiting patiently for me to see my own worth clearly. Tonight, I had finally found it. Not in revenge or in proving them wrong, but in quietly reclaiming myself from the shadows they'd cast. And somehow, standing there beside my truest friend, it felt infinitely more powerful than anything else ever could. When Zoe eventually left, I lingered a moment longer, savoring the quiet peace. I knew my family might never fully grasp what they'd lost, but that was no longer my burden. Their ignorance didn't diminish my truth. I walked slowly back to my desk, now covered with congratulatory notes, fresh flowers, and quiet reminders of the community I'd built around me, people who saw and valued me genuinely. Settling into my chair, I exhaled deeply, feeling a sense of quiet fulfillment I'd never imagined possible. Tonight marked the end of a lifelong battle for acceptance. I'd spent decades believing my worth depended on the acknowledgement of those who refused to see me, but now, free from that illusion, I was finally enough for myself. Smiling softly, I whispered into the quiet room, "Welcome home, Megan," because for the first time home was exactly where I was, within myself, finally at peace. Have you ever chased approval from people who never truly saw your worth? Have you struggled silently, feeling invisible despite your best efforts? My journey taught me something profound, that validation isn't something others give you. It's something you claim for yourself. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know it's okay to define success and worth on their own terms. Remember, your value isn't determined by someone else's limited view. It's rooted in how deeply you understand and accept yourself. Reflect, share your truth, and never let anyone else's blindness keep you from seeing your own light.